You've been taught your whole life that debt is a trap. Meanwhile, the richest people on earth are borrowing billions on purpose. One of them has pledged roughly a third of his company's shares to banks, just so he never has to sell them. He's not breaking the rules. He's playing by a completely different set. Let's start with the debt you already know. You buy the car, 5 years of payments, and the second you drive it home, it's worth less than you paid. You put dinner on a credit card, then a flight, then something you barely remember buying. The balance grows. The interest compounds, but this time it compounds against you. And every month a piece of your paycheck disappears before you even see it. That's the debt that keeps people awake at 3 a.m. It's real. It ruins lives, and you were right to be afraid of it. But here's what should stop you cold. The wealthiest people on the planet are carrying enormous amounts of debt too. Not by accident, not because they're struggling, because they want to. So either they know something you don't, or one of you is very, very wrong about what debt actually is. Here's the split, and it's simpler than anyone makes it sound. Your car loan bought something that loses value every single day. Your credit card bought a dinner you've already digested. That money is gone, but the debt stayed behind. Now flip it. What if the thing you borrowed for puts money back in your pocket? A building that collects rent, a business that makes a profit, shares in companies that grow. Same tool, completely opposite outcome, because debt was never good or evil. Debt is a lever. A lever lets a small person move something enormous. It multiplies force, but it multiplies in whatever direction you push. Push it towards something that grows, and it makes you richer, faster. Push it towards something that shrinks, and it buries you, faster. Rich people didn't discover a secret loophole. They just asked one question first. Does this debt buy something that pays me back? Let's look at exactly how they do it. 3 moves. Imagine you've saved $50,000. You could buy $50,000 of something. That's it. That's your ceiling. Or you could put that $50,000 down on a $250,000 property and borrow the rest. Now watch what happens. The property goes up 10%. It's worth $275,000. You made $25,000. But you only ever put in $50,000. So on your money, that's a 50% return from a 10% move. That's leverage. You controlled a $250,000 asset with a fraction of the cash. And here's the second layer. If tenants are paying rent, they're the ones covering the loan while you own the asset. Someone else's monthly payment is quietly buying you a building. Now, and this is the part the hype videos skip run, that math backwards. The property drops 10% instead. It's worth $225,000. You just lost $25,000, half of everything you put in, from a 10% move. The lever doesn't care which way you're pushing. It multiplies both. That's move 1. And it's the one that has made more ordinary millionaires and more bankruptcies than any other. Now the move almost nobody outside the wealthy world understands. Say you own shares that have grown enormously. You need cash. The obvious answer is to sell some. But the moment you sell, you trigger tax on the gain. A slice of that fortune leaves and never comes back. So here's what the very wealthy do instead. They don't sell. They borrow using those shares as collateral. And here's the key. A loan is not income. You have to pay it back. So borrowing money doesn't trigger a tax bill the way selling does. You get the cash. You keep the asset. It keeps growing. This isn't theory. It's in public filings. Elon Musk has pledged roughly a third of his Tesla shares to secure personal loans, hundreds of millions of shares listed as collateral. He's far from alone. Dozens of America's richest people pledge company stock for lines of credit. And this strategy has a name that tells you exactly how it ends. Buy, borrow, die. You buy assets that grow. You borrow against them instead of selling. And then this is the uncomfortable part: you die, because under current U.S. tax law, when your heirs inherit those assets, the tax clock resets to the asset's value on the day you died. All that growth over your lifetime, for capital gains purposes, it can vanish. You got the cash, you never sold, and the gain was never taxed. That's not a crime. It's the tax code working as written. But before you decide this is the ultimate hack, hold that thought, because in a few minutes, I'm going to show you why this move is far more limited than the internet claims. The third move is the oldest one, and it's the one closest to your actual life. A business borrows $1 million at, let's say, 6% interest. It uses that money to open new locations that earn it 15%. The gap, that 9%, is pure profit on money that was never theirs. That's the whole game. Borrow at one cost. Earn more than that cost. Keep the difference. It's why even massive cash-rich companies still issue debt. If money is cheaper than what they can do with it, borrowing is simply the cheaper option. And notice something. In every one of these three moves, the debt isn't buying a lifestyle. It's buying a machine, something that produces. The car loan bought you a thing. The business loan bought you a source of income. That distinction is the entire difference between the two kinds of people in this video. Now, let's talk about what happens when the lever snaps. His name was Bill Huang. He ran a private family office called Archegos, and almost nobody outside Wall Street had heard of him. Using borrowed exposure, reportedly many times his own capital, he turned a fund of around $1.5 billion into a portfolio worth tens of billions. For a while, he might have been making money faster than almost anyone alive. Then in March 2021, a few of his concentrated positions fell. And here's the mechanic that matters to you. When you borrow against an asset, the lender is watching its value. If it falls too far, they don't wait politely for a recovery. They issue a margin call, pay up now, or we sell your assets for you. Huang couldn't pay, so the bank started liquidating, which pushed the prices down further, which triggered more selling. Bloomberg reported he lost around $20 billion in 2 days, one of the fastest collapses of personal wealth ever recorded. The damage spread outward. Banks that had lent to him absorbed billions in losses. One of them shut down an entire division. To be fair and accurate, this wasn't leverage alone. Huang was later convicted of fraud and market manipulation and sentenced to years in prison. But the machinery that destroyed him in 48 hours was the margin call. The same machinery sitting quietly underneath every leverage position on earth. Warren Buffett has credited his partner Charlie Munger with a line about the 3 ways a smart person goes broke: liquor, ladies, and leverage. Buffett's joke is that the first 2 were only there for the alliteration. The real answer was always the third one. So let's be honest, because most videos on this topic stop right before the important part. First, and biggest, debt doesn't create wealth. It multiplies wealth that already exists. Every move in this video needed an asset first: a property, a portfolio, a business that earns. If you have nothing for the lever to push against, leverage doesn't multiply your fortune. It multiplies your risk. Second, buy, borrow, die is real. but it's wildly oversold online. Tax researchers have pointed out that borrowing to fund a wealthy lifestyle is actually a relatively small slice of what the ultra-rich live on. The bigger, duller advantage is simply that gains you haven't sold aren't taxed while they compound, and the wealthy still pay tax on plenty of income. So it's a real advantage, not a magic button. Third, that inheritance reset is a U.S. tax rule, and rules change. Lawmakers have repeatedly proposed removing it. If you're outside the United States, your country almost certainly handles this differently. Check before you build a plan around it. Fourth, the era of nearly free money is over. When borrowing costs more, the gap between what you pay and what you earn narrows and sometimes disappears entirely. Fifth, margin calls are not hypothetical. Tesla's own filings warn that if Musk were forced to sell pledged shares, the stock could fall. The world's richest people list this as a risk in writing. And finally, notice who is teaching you the debt secret. If someone's main business is selling you a course about getting rich with debt, ask a simple question. Are they wealthy from the strategy or from selling the strategy? So here's what all of this actually adds up to. Debt is a lever, and a lever needs solid ground to stand on. Your ground is boring and it's built long before you ever borrow a dollar. Income you can rely on. A cushion for the month everything goes wrong, and an asset that genuinely produces not one you're hoping someone will pay more for later. Get that right, and debt can move something enormous for you. Get it wrong, and the exact same tool is what breaks you in 2 days. And there's one more thing worth sitting with. On this channel, we met a janitor who quietly built $8 million using no leverage at all. Just decades of patience, and we watched people hand a fortune who lost it in a handful of years. Debt didn't decide either of those endings. Character did. The lever only ever amplified what was already true about the person holding it. So the real question was never, how do I use debt to get rich? It's this. If this tool magnifies everything about me, my discipline, my patience, my judgment, my mistakes, am I ready to be magnified? For most people, on most days, the honest answer is, not yet. And knowing that is worth more than any hack on the internet. Next time on this channel, we're breaking down another quiet truth about wealth, the one that decides who keeps it and who watches it disappear.